to today's chat about children. The Children's Foundation of Mississippi is delighted to host these chats and learn more about both the needs and the opportunities for children across Mississippi. The Children's Foundation believes that for Mississippi to reach its potential, we must make sure that our children reach their potential. Today's chat about children will spotlight important work being done on Mississippi's Gulf Coast in the areas of helping children reach their potential, of protecting children, unifying families when possible, and providing a forever home for children within the foster care system. So today's chat is one of the ways that the Children's Foundation is continuing to raise awareness about both the needs of children and families and spotlighting successful programs. So today we are delighted to have Ms. Cynthia Chauvin and Judge Trent Favre as guests on today's chats about children. Cynthia Chauvin is the Executive Director of Hancock County's Court-Appointed Special Advocate, or CASA program, with nearly 20 years of collective child welfare experience in both Mississippi and Louisiana. Cynthia brings an extensive knowledge of federal and state laws pertaining to children. As a veteran nonprofit manager and fundraiser, she prioritizes the relationships that exist within Hancock County and mobilizes the community to harness the resources needed to support the CASA program. This has not gone unnoticed, not only within the community, but certainly nationally. In 2019, Cynthia was selected as the National CASA Program Director of the Year by the National CASA Association. This award validated on a national scale what Hancock County already knew. Cynthia's passion for ensuring the safety of children is infectious, and that's in a good way in today's terms, and her willingness to share her knowledge with others make her an incredible leader. In fact, out of almost 1,000 CASA directors across the country, Cynthia Chauvin was the 2019 National CASA Program Director of the Year. We're also delighted to have Judge Favre. Judge Favre was appointed by Governor Phil Bryant in late 2017 to serve as Hancock County's first county court judge. He presides over youth court matters, including abuse, neglect, and delinquency matters. He also oversees a general civil litigation docket. Prior to his appointment, Judge Favre practiced for 19 years, focusing primarily on civil litigation and governmental law. He has completed Leadership Mississippi in 2010 and the Gulf Coast Business Council Master's Program in 2011. Served as a board member for various organizations across the Gulf Coast and beyond, including the United Way of South Mississippi, Hancock Chamber of Commerce, and the Gulf Coast Community Foundation, which he chaired. He also in 2019 was named Mississippi's 2019 Champion for Children for the Judicial Branch, and the Child Welfare and Child Advocacy Committee of the Mississippi Bar recognized him as a reunification hero for the state of Mississippi. And as Cynthia was recognized in 2019, so was Judge Favre. At the National Judicial Summit in 2019, Dr. Jerry Milner, an associate commissioner with the Children's Bureau, recognized Judge Favre in his opening address for his work. That's no small feat. And he currently serves on Mississippi's Court Improvement Team, and most recently was named the sole recipient of Mississippi Bar's Judicial Excellence Award. So you can see we bring to you two individuals who are extremely credentialed, but they are credentialed certainly by training, but the credentialing of their heart, the credentialing of their passion, what they have envisioned, and what has just been not just changed, but transformative on the Mississippi Gulf Coast. So we're delighted to learn more about this today. So Cynthia, if we may, we'll start with you. Please tell us about the history of CASA in Mississippi and the work of CASA in Hancock County.
Sure, thank you so much. So CASA in the state of Mississippi was established in 2002. This state organization's role is to provide support and training and direction in ways like technical assistance to the local programs that are operating in our state. Currently in the state of Mississippi, we have 6 local CASA programs. In addition to the program here in Hancock County, we have a program in Jackson County, Harrison County, Adams County, Warren County, and Lafayette County, the newest program in our state. While we have 82 counties, there is still an incredible need for CASA to have a presence in every community. And really that begins with the interest and the support of the local judiciary. So the judge, needs to want the service that we provide. And the service that we provide means that we recruit volunteers from the community to advocate for children that have come into the system through no fault of their own. So they are pure victims of child abuse or neglect, and they have active and open cases with both child protection, and they have an open case with the youth court. And those cases tend to be the most serious of the child abuse cases that are heard in local communities. And we are so fortunate here in Hancock County to be able to say that we serve 100% of the children in foster care in the county. That has certainly been no small feat on our end. 7 years ago, when I relocated to the area, we had a much larger number of children in custody, and we had a very small number of committed volunteers. 7 years ago, we had 26 volunteers. Now we have close to 100 volunteers. So as a small local nonprofit in a community of less than 50,000 people, this community has absolutely opened its arms and kind of wrapped its arms around the CASA program and the concern about children. And it has afforded us to grow our nonprofit to meet the needs of the court. And I know in a little while, Judge Favre will talk about some data points associated with the success of our court in terms of kind of moving the pendulum. So I certainly won't get into that at this point, but I'll say that the work that volunteers do for CASA is some of the most valuable ways community members can give back to their community and most importantly to children. But I know without a doubt it has the potential to shape generations to come. Because what we know about child abuse and neglect is that it is often multi-generational. And what we know is that there are many factors associated with it. And when volunteers come onto the scene as committed, safe adults that speak up for these children, some incredible things happen along the way. And we're just incredibly blessed to be in a community that supports our work and serving in a courtroom under Judge Favre that really gets it for children and families.
Thank you, Cynthia. That really sort of opens up and puts it in context about our discussion today. So yes, Judge Favre, tell us about the work of the youth court in Hancock County. And what was it like when you started and where is it today?
Okay, good question. So when I took the bench in January of 2018, we had approximately 389 children in custody. It was one of the highest rates per capita in the state of Mississippi and was on the national radar. Fortunately today, we have, through hard work, safely returned many children or found good permanent solutions for children. And we have 70 children in custody today. So it's over an 85% decrease in the number of children in custody. And this has been a national trend and a statewide trend, but our percentages are definitely eye-popping and have grabbed some attention. So there's, thinking back at the beginning of my tenure, it was very busy. And I think some of I had no child welfare experience, which is important to understand, but I think my litigation experience and just my work ethic were important because it's so important for youth court cases to move forward. You have to keep them on schedule. There are statutory guidelines that we have to follow. So adherence to those timelines, both state and federal, make a big difference in achieving permanency outcomes for children. But also focusing on problem cases. Whether you have a civil docket or a youth court docket, there's always those cases that have procedural issues or problems. And so one of the things that we did in working with CASA and CPS is within the first several months, within the first quarter, we identified the cases that were problem cases or had issues, and we tackled them. We prioritized those cases and moved those cases forward, trying to seek good resolutions and work through things so that we could move that case forward and hopefully achieve a good outcome for that child or for that family. But at the beginning, because it was so busy, it was not possible to go to the depths that we do now with children and families. So in the beginning, we were seeing cases every 3 months, unless there was a problem in a case, we would see it more frequently. The law only requires that we see a case on a permanency matter every 6 months. So one of the things that we did here, and this was just something I felt was necessary, is we moved our reunification cases to a monthly schedule. Mm-hmm. So what that did was it allowed us to monitor the status of the case, to move things forward on a monthly basis. It gives parents hope, right? Because they're coming back to court on a monthly basis and they know that we're really interested in trying to resolve the case and work with them and support them. One of the beautiful things about this process is when parents are doing well, then we can on a monthly basis pat them on the back and support them and encourage them along. Conversely, if they're not doing well, then we can find out why. We can discern, what that parent needs. We can let them sit in this courtroom with the team around them, and we can hear what their struggles are. We can hear what the problems are, whether it's a relapse or lack of visitation, or maybe their caseworker has issues. Whatever the issue is, we can hear it from them directly and work with them to try to figure out ways to solve that problem.
Well, and in some of the beginning of child welfare in this history of Mary Richmond, I think she, more than 100 years ago, talked about begin where the client is, begin where the child is, where the family is. And I'm also struck by, Cynthia, you're talking about the number of volunteers were low and it increased dramatically. Judge Favre, you talked about the cases were high and now they've decreased. That sounds like a really wonderful formula. And I bet there are some very strong statistical associations with that. But more important, the practical significance of this for families and children. And we also know in the state and across the country, the number of multiple placements that children experience, from family to foster care to shelter to whatever the different venue might be. And just as we know that we can only transplant plants so many times before they are thriving again, I think there's some similarities with some of the children, and the decrease in the number of placements has to be positive. And you're saying coming in and talking with families and children and understanding what their needs are. That's tremendous. It seems so simple, but unfortunately, in many places, it's not that way. Yeah. So how have your organizations come together? We talked about each of your organizations. So kind of walk us through what that looks like.
Sure. So I think really the most impactful way that Cynthia and I have partnered is identifying areas and opportunities to improve. So I think very early on, we realized that if we wanted to achieve success, we really all need to be working from the same playbook. And the way that you accomplish that is you train together. So we've engaged in a lot of multidisciplinary team approach type trainings, specifically, to understand trauma. I think that is the buzzword nationally, but we really put our money where our mouth is when it comes to understanding trauma and the effects of trauma on the child. Not just, there's two aspects of it: the trauma of removal, right? The effect that has on the child's brain development. And then something I'm going to slip in there too, because it's often overlooked, the trauma to the parent. So the parent, sustains trauma during the removal as well. And then there's the ongoing trauma that a child might have from abuse or neglect. We know that that affects their brain development and throughout their life can affect the way that they process, the way they interact with people. And it also, there are studies, the ACEs studies say that it affects their health and well-being for the rest of their life. So understanding trauma has been a key. We've done some really good training. We partnered with CPS very early on to do their practice model learning cycle, which the state jumped on and thought was such a good idea. I came up with this idea because I heard they were training, and I said, I think that's something we need to know. Can we do that training? So they brought their state trainer in, trained us, and then they decided this is probably something we should do in other jurisdictions. So we brought in CASA and other partners to participate in that training.
That's great. And for our audience, when you say CPS, you're meaning Child Protective Services.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, great. So it was a lot of cross training then that happened.
It's a lot of cross training. I think one of the most effective trainings we did within the first year was a multidisciplinary approach. We brought in a professional from Louisiana's Pelican Center, and they did some training for all of us on safety and risk assessment. And that really, you could see everyone's minds coming together, learning about the same material. It really helped us all kind of understand how to assess safety issues and risk assessments, weighing that trauma of removal in the process. Another very meaningful training that we partnered with CASA on was a trauma-informed approach. It's called TBRI, Trust-Based Relational Intervention. And we actually had the opportunity to bring in a judge from the state of Texas, as well as a doctor, Dr. Winstead. So Judge Clark and Dr. Winstead came in and did a 2-day training for us. And we had at least 90 people participate in this training. So we spent 2 days understanding trauma. We focused on the book, The Body Keeps the Score. If you haven't read it, it's a very good book that really gives you a playbook of what happens to the brain in trauma and how we can approach people who have gone through trauma. And we've also done some training on the science of addiction. So a lot of these training opportunities we've realized work better if we bring in everybody. So Cynthia has put together trainings, includes us, and vice versa.
That's wonderful. A few weeks ago, we were talking with Dr. Thomas Dobbs, the state health officer, on one of our chats about children. And when he mentioned the importance of public health is really reaching across sectors. And it sounds like it's something very similar, obviously helping families and children when it's interdisciplinary and you're working across systems. So we know the numbers have gone down in the number of children and families who were in the system and not in a permanency area. And we also said that the number of volunteers have gone up. So what are some of the markers of success? Cynthia, what are some of the reactions of the families, the children, the parents? And we know many children are in care of their grandparents or other relatives. So how is this, when the rubber meets the road, as we say, how is it really impacting families and children? What are some of the things that they're telling you and that you're seeing?
Sure. I think when we think about outcomes for the children and families that we work with, it's on many levels. There are the benchmark kind of hallmark outcomes of permanency when you have the opportunity to see a family reunited. That's really this utopian gift that us in the system get to see when families can do the necessary and the hard work to reconnect their fractured lives for their kids. It's just an unbelievable experience to be a part of, and to know in some small way your work and your support of your volunteers helped the family get to that point and empowered the family. But our work is hard. These are families that they don't necessarily they don't necessarily get it quickly, and they don't always have what they need to be able to get it quickly. And sometimes they don't get it. So I think, some of our indicators have to be small wins, the short-term wins when a family that's working towards reunification, when they come in on a monthly hearing and judge is checking in with the family and they stay clean that last month. That's, to people who do not have a background in addiction, it's like, okay, yeah, you got your kids taken away. Really, yeah, stay clean a month, big deal. But for our families and for everyone's families, because addiction crosses so many boundaries of the social structure, staying clean a month is big. Staying clean a day, so, I think our outcomes are short-term and still very big, but I also think our long-term outcomes are when our families get reconnected, when our children who are not able to go home, just this past weekend, our local child protection agency held a drive-through adoption day event. And we partnered with CPS to be able to have two facets to that event. I had written a grant to the Build-A-Bear workshop, and we were able to acquire Build-A-Bear bears for all of our adopted kids in Hancock County. So we provided those bears to the kids that have been adopted in the last year. And then the second piece of that is a project that I'm super proud of is, as the numbers started going down in our county and really the quality of our work, I think we really dug in deeper. We were able to identify some things that Judge, I, and some of our partners felt strongly about. And one of those things was having kids be able to participate in their court hearings. And that didn't come on a lark. We were very intentional in trying to figure out how to do this through best practices, because obviously coming into a court setting is intimidating. Hearing and seeing your parents and what has happened to them and what they have done to you as a child victim can be very scary and can be traumatic too. So we did a lot of research and developed a protocol around safely integrating children into their court hearings, which I believe to be incredibly cathartic for them to be able to, in a safe place, well prepared, be able to communicate to the judge their needs, what they want to say, have questions answered. The judge shouldn't be someone like behind the machine in the Wizard of Oz that you never lay eyes on. He's a great guy, and he has an ability to do his job and connect with our kids on a real level. So having our kids participate in their courtrooms, but also ensuring their mental health safety and their physical safety in those moments has really been transformative, and I believe has been a huge, huge indicator of success for us. Now, I will say, to make that happen, it was also important to figure out how to best protect our kids and provide an extra layer of support to them. So about a year and a half, I wrote, we applied through Canine Companions for Independence to be considered as a host agency to be able to have a courthouse facility dog, which is a assistance dog that provides support through the use of a professional handler in a discipline to a large variety of people, in our case, children with special needs. So back during, I think that was about August, in COVID world, it's a little interesting, you forget the months, but back in August, we actually, my staff member, who is our dog's handler, traveled to Florida and was matched and extensively trained to be able to bring back our courthouse facility dog. So her name is Remy. She was brought to us by no charge at all. She was professionally trained, intentionally bred, and an incredible gift to the children that she serves that come into this courtroom.
Well, that's tremendous. So you talked about cathartic, intentional, and then you have Remy there on site as well. And it is a very cathartic, but also I would think it must be some level of empowering children and who have not felt like they have had control over their lives, and also the families to know that this is very dynamic and interdependent and very facilitative on what really sounds like a solutions-based approach. I mean, there are problems, there are challenges, extreme challenges, and consistent. But it does sound like, and I know from having been there, when you walk in the door, and I think this is a good segue, and I noticed the artwork behind you in the background, and hopefully we'll share some more of those later. But I was really struck when I was there over a year or so ago, thanks to the introduction with Cindy Walker. One of the things is that welcoming environment, and this artwork is not just any artwork. As I recall, it's commissioned, and it was to help instill within the environment to instill hope. And I know with Justice, I'm sorry, Don Bean and the Mississippi Commission on Justice, that there is this whole array of hope rising from Dr. Chan's book, etc. But tell us about what hope means to you and what it means to the children in the environment of the court area there in Bay St. Louis.
So hope has been a theme of mine since I took the bench. It's a theme in our courtroom. As you can see, we have two of our panels displayed behind us, which coincidentally, the state is now using in that Hope Rising. They've made duplicates of our paintings to make banners and also bookmarks. So the artwork has definitely changed the courtroom aesthetic. And, that's important because, we serve families, right? And so we want our families to feel like this is their place. It's their courtroom to resolve their issues. So the idea came to me when I brought my daughter into the courtroom, and I guess she was 12 or 13 when I brought her in for the first time, and nobody was here. And she walked around and she said, "Dad, this place is scary." And she was literally scared. So it made me think about how children might be scared in the courtroom and how parents might be scared as well. I found it scary too. So we lightened up the colors in the courtroom, but I knew art would bring a new dimension to the courtroom. So I asked the community to get involved, and I purchased the panels through a grant and that CASA helped us with. So this was a partnership with CASA. And we had over 25 paintings from local artists or, kids at school. My daughter did one, my wife did one. So we have some beautiful paintings. We even had an inmate from the jail that did some beautiful charcoal sketches for us. So they do hang in the courtroom, and you can tell that parents, children, when they come in, they are engaged by the paintings, and they read this word hope, which is incorporated into every painting. It's a conversation piece, and in certain instances, I can ask children which painting is their favorite, why, and it opens the door to some conversation. It also allows me to speak words of restoration to these families. When they see the word hope, I can talk to them about what that means to them. And just use words that sound like we care, we love them, we want to love them, we want to support them. These are things that they would not normally associate with court. And so to walk into a courtroom and see hope just adds another dimension to what we're trying to communicate outside the walls of the courtroom.
Yes, and Judge Favre, you may not remember, but I remember a story you told me, and I do remember the charcoal paintings because they were different, and that was a whole different way of bringing someone into the community who was incarcerated but had an amazing talent for art. But you told the story of a child coming in with her mom and had her by the hand, and she obviously had talked to the mom before she got there, telling her about the artwork. And I remember you saying that you overheard the child look up to the mom and said, "See, Mom, I told you there's hope everywhere."
Yes.
That story has so resonated. I have told that story to so many people, and that's really, in many ways, what the Children's Foundation is also about in looking at policy and systems change on behalf of children to also restore some hope. But you tell that story so beautifully because it is living. And so we also know earlier, you also talked about the situations that parents are in, and talk about the trauma of the children, the trauma of the parents, etc. And we recognize that the greater number of stressors that a family experiences certainly influences the likelihood of abuse and neglect. We know in our vehicles that for example, there's various indicator or warning lights that pop up when our car is overheated or we have problems with air pressure or low on fuel. We also know that the research and practice experiences tells us that similarly, these stressors are also warning signs in families, in children. So would you describe how you mentioned addiction earlier, but what are some of the other things that you are seeing common stressors for families? Some before COVID and some I would imagine that are being really heightened even during this COVID season. So you want to start, Cynthia?
Sure. So I think because our data always gives us the touch points to start conversations, having the majority of our cases involving families that have neglect issues, and knowing that over 70% of our cases involve substance abuse, that is what we're most familiar with. So, stressors associated with an active using parent include financial limitations, obviously, include a lot of unknowns, instability, includes, lack of predictability for children. During COVID in particular, we've seen large gaps of time when children have not been able to go into traditional school environments. In a community like Hancock County, we have segments of the county that are rural where internet accessibility is a challenge. So even if the school provides a laptop, that doesn't necessarily mean that the ability to log on and do virtual learning is that strong of an option. And then if by chance you do have internet connection, you also have the challenge of if you have a caretaker who's under the influence, the nature of their addiction is so unpredictable that you may have someone who guides and supports and provides supervision for you today, but you don't necessarily know that when you wake up tomorrow, that person's going to be in a place where they can give you the guidance that you need. We've seen during COVID families struggle economically. In our local community, we have a lot of families that need stable housing. We have, community members who are living transiently with populations of people who can put their children at risk. If you're a substance abuser and you're living kind of couch surfing from one friend or family member to the next, the probability that you in some way, because of your addiction, may leave your child in the hands of somebody who's not safe increases. So we see situations in which children can be more at risk for vulnerable encounters with unsafe people who could potentially perpetrate sexual abuse upon them. So, the nature of the work that we do is really some of the most tragic and situations that put children in imminent risk of harm. If a parent just has a bad day and loses their cool, that's not the kind of situation that's going to come before our court system. Our situations are more grave, and for CPS and for the court to intervene in a take custody venue, these children's lives are at risk. So, the obstacles we see sometimes involve domestic violence, sometimes involve incarceration. Although incarceration alone is not a reason for a child to come into foster care, just talking earlier about the complexities of our population, there are often multi-facets to the challenges, the social challenges that our families face. So it's a lot.
It's a lot. And my goodness, the resources that are needed, the human resources, the capital, the community support that you just mentioned, it truly is. It's life-changing, but it can also be life-threatening. And the preservation, first of all, of the safety of the child. And Cynthia, you mentioned about during the pandemic that some of the places that children are more often seen in school settings, et cetera. We also know that a large percentage of children have not been going in for their well child visits since March. So that's another reporting source of pediatricians and healthcare providers that haven't been able to, as we say, really take an eyeball look at the children. So Judge Favre, have you seen the increase of child abuse and neglect increase since school has started, and we know across the country it has gone down in the early months of the pandemic, but we're also wondering about a wave of some of this coming about?
So yes, we did see a decrease in the number of reports that were being made. And I want to be very careful about how we approach this. Very early on, even Dr. Milner and David Kelly that works with him cautioned us to not have such a dismal perspective of families, that the presumption that just because children are not at school, that they're neglected. I know in my own personal life, I saw struggles in our family, but I also saw some beautiful things happen, learning how to connect as a family and make the best of the situation. But we do know that some people aren't equipped with that ability. So what we do anticipate every year when school lets out for the summer is a decrease in the number of reports. Teachers, of course, are mandatory reporters, and they are our primary reporter. And you also identified physicians as reporters. So if they've had less contact with physicians, then there's a decrease in reporting. But we do anticipate this every year. It's just with the pandemic hitting in March and schools closing down, we saw the dip happen a lot sooner. One of the silver linings is I'm also I preside over delinquency matters, right? So children that commit crimes. We saw a decrease in the amount of childhood crime, which was a good thing, right? So there was that silver lining, but I think everyone at the beginning of the pandemic said, oh no, when school starts back in the fall, we're going to see this surge of reports. And kids will be back in school, and then teachers will observe their bruises on their leg, or they'll hear disclosures being made, or they'll observe irregular conduct, and reports will start coming in again. So when in our county, we have 2 school districts, and the county school district started back timely in August, and the city school district delayed until after Labor Day. So the county school district had some time to get back into the groove. But we did not see the huge increase in reporting that everyone had anticipated. So that gave me a little bit of concern because we did see a spike, but it was not what I thought or what everyone else was thinking. So I thought it would be important for me to reach out to the 4 elementary school principals in that school district to see what's going on there. And what I found in my research is that enrollment is down. And for example, in one school, they had a enrollment of about 600 children the year before, and their enrollment was down to about 510. But additionally, they had children who are elected for the in-home option or the distance learning. And so that school had 65 children who did not enroll, who enrolled in the distance learning. And so while there were parents and one family I know of who were immune compromised and decided that it would be best to keep their kids home from school, the majority of those were concerned about. And this isn't just my perspective. Talking to each of those principals, the population that did not enroll or is doing the distance learning, those were children who were on their radar. And so there are two facets of this. There was the concern that there's no eyes on these children, and there's really no way legally to put eyes on those children. The school can't send people out to the homes. We can't send CPS out without a report. So there was that facet, but also another interesting facet. And I say this, it is research, and so I don't know that I can express this adequately, but one of the things that we've also learned is the number of discipline referrals at the schools has gone down. And so I say that, I preface that with, I hate when people say a kid is a problem child. It's not a problem child. That child might have problems, but they're not a child. And so that population of kids, they have issues that need to be dealt with. And sometimes those things manifest at school. Conduct is communication. And so whatever issues that they have going on, they may be observed at school. And a lot of times, they need someone to help them process and work through whatever those issues are. So those were two things that I learned, but I was very concerned that, that there are children who do not have eyes on them. And that causes a lot of stress. We want to serve families. And I wanted to make this point earlier on. I jotted a little note when you were talking about hallmarks. We were talking about one of the hallmarks in dealing with reporting. With a report becomes CPS involvement and then court involvement. And one of the things that I wanted to do is kind of get rid of that mentality and make our system a system that people can go to ask for help. And we've had a couple instances in the past year where a parent, rather than waiting to have a report filed, rather than waiting to hit rock bottom, they relapsed or something else came up in their life and they actually called CPS and said, I need help. And to me, that's what my goal is. If we can if we can be a system that is a resource for parents, and we're not always on the reactive side, but on the proactive side of things, then we're winning. And that is our goal here.
Yes, you are winning, because that means the children are winning, because the parents have the wherewithal and the self-awareness, I think is what I'm trying to say, to recognize, again, back to that sort of warning light. I know some things amiss here. What can I go in and get some help with? So what are resources within the county? Certainly CASA, people calling CPS, but that is the exception rather than the rule, I would imagine. But so what resources are in your community, or what are some resources that are needed that could be helped, that could help these children?
So when we were talking about addiction, I think, we were talking about stressors, and addiction in and of itself is a stressor.
Yes.
So if you put yourself in the mind of an addict, it's, I really want to quit, but I can't. And that is a stress. It becomes a stress in and of itself. So the lack of available resources is an issue here, and across the state and the country. Really evidence-based scientific approaches for addiction are not available. But fortunately, hope is on the horizon here. Early on in the pandemic, I applied for a federal grant, and we received a $750,000 grant for 3 years. And we are partnering, and this again comes through a partnership with CASA. Cynthia put me in touch with the right person, Dr. Roy, who is on the staff at Tulane Medical Center. And we're going to partner with Tulane Medical to provide treatment options, outpatient, intensive outpatient treatment options for our parents. And it's going to also be a partnership with the School of Social Work at Tulane. So this is going to be a very robust and hopefully profound program for our parents that'll bring quicker options for them and more in-depth options. Also, when people with a substance abuse disorder often have a co-diagnosis, and a lot of times those are not treated. So this will give us, working with a psychiatrist like Dr. Roy, will give us the ability to assess these parents and determine what other treatment that they need and get them the treatment that's necessary.
Well, that's tremendous. So that gives us another idea for a chat about children going forward, to check back in and see how this program is going. So earlier and throughout, we have sprinkled in and underscored the importance of hope, and the successes in Hancock County are certainly clear. And to be able to replicate this across other areas of the state. So if there's someone out there who is interested in learning more about becoming a CASA volunteer or becoming a foster parent, where can they find out more information? And I also would think that it would be important for each of these groups to have sort of their own sort of support system, so that they can reach out to other foster parents or other CASA groups. So would Cynthia, would you tell us some about that, and also Judge Favre?
Sure. So if someone across the state is interested in either being a foster parent or being a CASA, I'd first say that there's a huge need for both. They do require this same passion for children and this same energy to want to be part of working in a system that is complex. Foster parents generally go through the process with the Department of Child and Family Services through the Child Protection Agency to become licensed. Folks can go through that process through contacting their local county office of their origin. For someone who's interested in potentially volunteering with one of the 6 CASA programs in the state, I would say reach out individually to that particular program. And I'll say again, it's Hancock, Harrison, Jackson, Adams, Warren, and Lafayette. And if someone would have it kind of on their heart to think that this is something they'd like to do to establish in their local community where there is not a CASA program, the first idea would be to reach out to the National CASA GAL organization. You can find them online at nationalcasagal.org. And there's certainly a process to creating a CASA program, and there's support for someone who would want to do that. It does start and end and everything in between with the judge in that community. So if you were thinking about starting a CASA program or wanting to consider it, reaching out and having a conversation with the judge in that community would be incredibly important in first steps.
That would be great. And I know I'm putting you on the spot, Judge Favre, but being able to reach out to other judges across the state, I'm sure the work that you've done is so well known across the country and certainly in the state, but to be able to have a visit or to have some conversations, well, maybe more of a Zoom call as we're having these days. So tell us how open you are and available to that.
I'm very open. I've had judges come here to observe, and in the next couple of weeks, I'm having the president of the Mississippi Bar come in to observe the courtroom. I've had the court improvement team come in. We haven't used the word collaboration enough, have we, in this conversation? I mean, this is all about collaboration. And when I speak to other judges, I'm taking notes. I want to know what they're doing, what's effective, what best practices they're implementing, what novel approaches they have to the issues. And so when we get together and cross-pollinate, I think good things happen. And so I'm always excited to allow people to come into the courtroom to see what we're doing and following the law and learning the rules of how to conduct a hearing is one thing. But what I really want to impart to people when they're in this courtroom is what they hear me say. And that is approaching these parents and the children in a loving manner letting it be clear that we really care for them. And I think that's something, it's hard. It's not something you can just read a book about and teach. It's something you have to really dig deep inside and understand. And really, I think for me, it's knowing that, I know myself that I have my own flaws and misgivings and things that, I'm not proud of in my life. So for a parent to play that out in front of a room full of people must be very difficult. So I try to remember that every time I approach a parent, that I want them to leave their shame behind and focus on improvement and focus on, hope and healing and restoration.
Right. And each day is a new opportunity going forward. So for community leaders, for legislators, are there things that you would like for them to know?
Yeah, there are a lot of resources. We're fortunate for Hancock County to have, a star CASA chapter. We have one of the state's 13 child advocacy centers here. It's Hope Haven. We also have a high performing CPS, always working on improvement with CPS and that partnership. But we also have the Hancock County Resource Center, which provides an array of services for parents. So, if I were speaking to the legislature, I think putting boots on the ground, putting resources, front loading the service options for parents really makes a lot of sense. It may be a larger cash outlay at the beginning, but if you're diminishing the amount of time a child stays in custody and really bringing true meaningful healing to families, then in the back end, you're saving tax dollars. So I'd ask our legislatures and our state leaders to really think about ways that we can front and load the services that we provide to families.
So we're really talking in many ways about prevention as much as possible, and then having a trained staff, professional development, and having that ratio so that social workers or case managers can go out and really have a manageable caseload. There's just such a wide array of opportunities here. And so is there anything, the last question, is there anything I've not asked you that you would like to share with our audience? Any closing thoughts?
I would say, just thinking about the question about our legislature, I would say running a small local nonprofit is not easy, especially not easy during a pandemic. What we know from studies is that CASA works for kids. We know nationally from studies that have been done at the national level that children that have a CASA are less likely to re-enter the foster care system. We know that they have more services when they're in foster care. And that's because they have that committed volunteer coming into this courtroom and speaking very honestly, but also very specifically about that child and their needs. I'm so proud of the fact that over 85% of the recommendations that my volunteers make, Judge Favre orders. And that's not just because he supports CASA, that's because these unique volunteers know these kids' needs and are able to convey them to him in a way in which it makes sense and it's in their best interest. We at this point, as a local CASA program, a state chapter, we receive no dollars from our state legislature. I would like to hopefully have that kind of on my wish list of future things to accomplish is to expand CASA in the state of Mississippi so that more children have access to a volunteer, but understanding that volunteers do not mean that what goes on behind the scenes, there's no dollar to. So I would love for our legislators to consider down the road the ability to not only legitimize the work that our volunteers are doing, but expand it to other parts of our state.
Well, thank you. And of course, working in concert with Child Protective Services throughout this must be something that has also helped the outcomes for children in this state. So in a topic and a field such as child welfare that some people have indicated that we don't have as many successes that we would like, but you each of you, together with your community partners, working in concert with children and their families, truly are making some transformational changes. So when I think about the Gulf Coast and I think about the symbolism of the lighthouse and hope as a guiding principle with the Mississippi Commission on Children's Justice, and hope that's throughout your courtroom there, it literally and figuratively does give us hope for the future, and we want to thank you for this. So on behalf of the Children's Foundation and all the children and families that you serve, thank you for all you're doing and for making time today out of your extremely busy schedules to participate in the chat about children. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.